Good morning or afternoon, everyone. It's great to be with you here today. Financial literacy, this is our topic today, has never been more important. It affects everything from daily spending habits to long-term financial security. Yet, despite its impact, many people still struggle with basic financial concepts, and businesses often overlook the value of integrating financial education into their strategies. That's exactly what we're here to discuss today: how we can make financial education engaging, effective, and beneficial for both customers and businesses, and how can companies leverage it to build trust, loyalty, and long-term value. To help us navigate this topic, we have our outstanding panelists today who bring unique perspective from gamification, fintech, and AI-driven innovation. Let me introduce you to James Bradbury, who is a seasoned business leader with a background spanning FMCG, music, and technology. He has held key roles at companies like Cadbury, EMI, Nokia, Microsoft, and Samsung. Now he is Chief Commercial Officer at GameLayer, and he helps brands, agencies, and platforms enhance customer engagement through gamification. And we also have with us David Giron. David is CEO and founder of eFrontiers, a company at the intersection of EdTech and fintech. And eFrontiers uses gamified microlearning to help financial institutions deliver engaging financial education. He's passionate about closing the financial inequality gap by empowering people with the knowledge they need to make better financial decisions. Welcome, James, David. It's great to have you here. Now let's dive into the topic. So the first section of our discussion is about the strategic importance of the financial education. So let's begin with the big picture. Why financial education is more important than ever, and how companies should think about it strategically. James, why is financial education becoming increasingly important and critical in today's economy, and what role do companies play in addressing this need, in your opinion?
Big question and a good one. I think one of the key reasons why it's so important is because financial education traditionally often feels boring or inaccessible. And I think that's a real issue because this kind of financial literacy and understanding about finance is a key way that people learn how to save, invest, how to manage debt, and how to build a pot for themselves for retirement. And I think that's increasingly an issue that many countries are facing as jobs become less secure over the long term. People are less inclined to set up longer term retirement funds. And I think fintechs now have a real opportunity to improve this massively, and shifting from sort of passive information sharing to more active habit forming experiences. So driving better financial behaviors. And I think both David and I are pretty passionate about how we go about that.
Yeah. So the open question to you would be that despite growing the awareness, the financial education solutions still see a low adoption on the market. I think you agree with me. So why do you think that is? What challenges are holding back the widespread implementation? What do you think, David?
Yeah, so I think a lot of people, a lot of institutions have tried. So you see, for example, financial institutions, and if you look at their efforts, they always tend to be just blogs that nobody visits. So it seems that they've tried to do it, but they're not have fully committed. And the reason is banks are not educational institutions, right? So they're doing this as maybe a marketing tool or a way to do CSR, but at its core, they're not really EdTech professionals. And I think that's what has led them to kind of just do the same thing over and over again, which is just blogs or different like paper elements, right, to help education. I think there's also other institutions, kind of like startups that have tried to do the Duolingo of finance, which we did as well. But finance is very different around the world, right? Like, so the rules that apply to somebody in Guatemala like myself and somebody in Switzerland, there's two very different things. So I think a one-size-fits-all approach doesn't really work. That's why we believe a bit different. We believe that actually the financial institutions should drive this change. I mean, they have the brand, they have the products, they have the knowledge, they got the customers, right? But they should partner with somebody that maybe is really focusing, in this case, gamification, and in our case, is actually a platform for microlearning, right? So I think that partnership is the better way forward. But sadly, I think around the world, I haven't seen something that has been a game changer.
Okay. Any thoughts on this, James?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I see a lot of fintechs concentrate on bringing new products and new ways of engaging the market, but there seems to be relatively little in terms of actually innovative ways of educating people about finance, and partially because maybe they're asking the wrong questions. They're thinking to themselves, how do I make more money? How do I drive people to take up my account? Instead of thinking one step before that of like, okay, how do I inform people why they need to be interested in this? Particularly young people. So, I mean, I can sort of remember when I was young, and I think back to those days, you think your whole life stretching ahead of you and you don't need to do too much financial planning. You just need to earn money and live in the now, and everything's good and everything will be good. The truth couldn't be further away. You know, once you understand a bit about compound interest, you understand a bit about the value of a pound saved today or a dollar saved today versus a dollar saved in 20 years, it's quite stark, and you can gamify that and make that very accessible to people to really understand the power of saving, the power of investing, the power of having a proper view on their pension as well, and the benefits of doing that as well. So, I mean, I can speak with quite a lot of experience about the UK, but I mean, you know, I don't think people have any clue about the tax implications of putting money into a pension for a start. They might get some form of education and some kind of nudge from their company when they join. And there are some sort of mandatory pension schemes. But I think a lot of young people don't engage with it because it's not interesting. It's not presented in an interesting way. It's just dull.
Okay. Yeah, I think that covers the approach from the customer and user's perspective. But how about the business and its approach and the impact that that gamification or financial education brings to them? How do you think that the improving the financial literacy among the customers will influence the companies or businesses' long-term growth and customers' loyalty and engagement? Is investing in financial education worth it for businesses and companies? David, do you think that you have any idea of that?
Yes. So here I'm very passionate about this because we're seeing the numbers, we're seeing the data with what we're doing, and education. I mean, look, let me take a step back. We keep coming up with new products, new ideas, but these new products will never be adopted if people don't understand them. I always do my pitch and I say, the financial industry spends over $90 billion every year trying to market products that people don't understand. So of course that leads to extremely high lead generation costs and so on. Rather, they should focus on trying to educate the users, because I believe that anybody, once you start learning about finance, once you start understanding how your money works, well, that starts opening more doors, and you want to learn about products that might help you, put your money to work. There's another statistic that blew my mind, and I gotta get fact checked here, but there's about $4 trillion just in the EU sitting down in savings and low yield accounts. So you're talking that when you see inflation being 3-4%, that money is just getting eroded. But the problem is that people just don't understand what their options are. So I think that is where the keyword education comes in. If, like James said, if it's well done and you let people understand their options, then that can drive to unlock a lot of this money that is sitting down yielding very low returns, to put it to work. And that's where the financial institutions make their money as well. So it is a win-win. It's just, sadly, we maybe as I said before, the banks have tried to do it maybe just as a side project rather than really focusing on it. And I think that's what we're trying to change, right? Trying to say, hey, if we present this properly, if we get there early on, just imagine the change. James, I'll probably ask you first, but the change in your life, if you would have learned about investing maybe when you were 20, 21, I'm sure it was life changing. For me, it's been a game changer. And I come from Guatemala, a humble background, and it's just opened the world for opportunities. And yeah, so I really think that education will enable people to understand the products, and that will drive more revenue for financial institutions in the end.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. And I think to sort of reinforce what you're saying, a lot of the financial institutions just find consumers that aren't engaging with financial literacy tools that they provide. Why not? Because they assume that the users are sort of rational decision makers who are going to engage with it purely out of self-interest without actually being told why they should engage with it. So the reality is people don't seek out financial education unless it's easy, relevant, and rewarding. And that's where gamification really comes in, because you can make it rewarding through psychological rewards like badges or points, or you can make it really rewarding by actually giving people an incentive to do it. It could be a financial incentive, could be something like a hat or a cup of coffee. But where that's been done, and mostly outside the financial industry, but where it's been done, it's been hugely successful, hugely successful.
If I may add to this point, and I think this is also why maybe financial institutions have not invested more into this, is because they've tried this kind of blogs and obviously they failed. And then now they think, oh, we tried financial education, so that means it doesn't work. Maybe it's just they haven't taken the right approach. And to James' point, it's incredible what gamification can do. Just a quick example, we have a partner in Spain who just offers kind of books as incentives for people to, if you score the most points in our leaderboard, you get a few books on finance. And you got people that are using the app daily. They might have finished the content already and they're doing it over again. And it's something as simple as a book. Just imagine what the bigger banks can probably do to incentivize users to learn.
Yeah, I mean, we see that all the time. People are incentivized, actually, in many ways, just by the game. The game itself. The prize is not incidental because they want the prize, but it's the game that gets them engaged. And I think there's a much bigger point around all of this as well, and my hypothesis is that engaged and financially literate customers will make better decisions. They will trust your services more. They'll stick around longer. They'll probably invest more, spend more, put more money into the products that you're providing if you explain them properly and if you explain the outcomes that they're going to get by investing or using these products. And it could be any products, from insurance to pension to savings accounts to investment accounts to stocks and shares, anything. But to anyone who doesn't know about it, it can seem impenetrable, complicated, difficult, and risky.
Okay, so from your perspective, it does make a lot of business sense business-wise to introduce such mechanism, because it improves the customer base, their loyalty to the company, their engagement into the platform, and actually more literate customers, they will still purchase your instruments, but with understanding of how they work. Is it right?
Yeah. Oh, and incidentally, they're much more likely to be advocates of your brand, because they're going to be engaged. So and you can build that in as part of your gamification, in that you reward people for referrals as well. So refer someone, get a reward, and that reward can be for both people, both the referred and the referee. And actually, this is an area where some of the financial businesses or products do it quite well. Like American Express does a really good referral program, but they don't have a very wide gamified experience.
Okay, that actually led me to my next question. I was going to ask about, apart from the business perspective, the revenue perspective, does financial education play the role in the company's corporate social responsibility and their brand reputation, right? Can it help the big companies to improve their brand reputation on the market by introducing the financial education components? David, do you think so?
Yes, so there's actually quite a bit of research here, and I'll give it from two perspectives. The first is, if you look at the United Nations the development goals, right? About 8 of those have financial inclusion as a key enabler. And how do you get to financial inclusion? Going back to what I said, right? People just don't know what options are out there for them. So the only way to include them is by educating them on what are their options. So kind of going back to that point. But then maybe something that touches more, I would say, like a place in my heart, which is I come from Guatemala, right? It's an underdeveloped country, and sadly you'll see that people will go and take a shark loan just because they don't even know, they don't trust the bank. They don't even want to go to the door of the bank just because immediately they don't trust it. So you already kind of like beating yourself up, it's not letting you get better as a country. And at the end, if you think of a country, right? So the decisions of everybody, and if everybody's actually investing in the economy, things work out. But if, people are just taking shark loans and there's a lot of corruption, everything kind of starts breaking apart. So I think this is a huge piece of CSR. I mean, Every institution we've spoken with, they all say, hey, we want to do financial inclusion. We want to do financial education. We just don't know how to do it right. We've tried this, we've tried that. And I think that's where like these bigger institutions need to start looking maybe at the small players like maybe ourselves or people experts like James, right? To say, hey, we need help in this. Why don't we try something different? And having a bit of courage to try something different.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I think it's an interesting perspective, sort of looking at Guatemala, looking at countries like where maybe it's even more difficult. But I mean, even if I'm looking at the UK, I don't think it's done very well. Mostly, I think there's a great opportunity, and some companies have started doing it. I mean, Scottish Widows has done a really great gamified experience on pensions, which is one that I think is going to change their entire perspective on how they approach consumers. So they really gamified that and using AI to scan faces and determine the perceived age, then comparing them to their actual age and their pension savings that they would need in order to have retirement. As a result of introducing this, and this is the material point, is 193% increase in employee engagement in these events. So their employees are super engaged in this product because it actually brings it to life. 135% increase in 193% increase in registrations for the Scottish Widows app. 193% increase. So huge, and 135% increase in employee engagement in these events. So I got that wrong. And then 40% increase in employer participation in pension programs. So right across the piece, because pensions are, employee, employer, and a pension provider. So you've got three people in that. And that scheme has engaged all those three entities successfully. So as a result, Scottish Widows have now built a whole team dedicated to gamification because they've seen it just works. Yeah. So to me, it's a no-brainer and one that big financial institutions should be paying real attention to. And I mean, you don't have to look too far. If Vitality in the UK has used gamified experience very successfully, and that is not, it's not quite a financial product, but it sort of is. It's an insurance product still. So they've been hugely successful. So there are companies out there who've proven that it works, highly successfully, and are stepping up even from the start point of gamification, are stepping it up over time because they just see the benefits of doing it.
Perfect. Yeah.
I wanted to say, so James, you made a really good point, and it's something that I found quite shocking. Is you're right. Like even in this, let's say the first world, Europe, the lack of financial education. I mean, we look at a place like Switzerland. I was thinking this is everybody should know about finance in Switzerland, right? Well, you're talking that almost 40% of the population can answer basic questions about finance, like what is an interest rate, very, very simple things. In the US, it's about 37%. So it's not really just because people make more money that they know about finance or not. Sadly, no matter where you are, this just gets skipped at the high school level and then at the college level. We did a study that showed that even people with PhDs, about 20% of them can answer basic questions about finance, which is just mind-blowing that someone can go through university for such a long time and just never been informed about finance. And the last point I'll make, and I try to bring this to my presentations always, is it doesn't matter what you do in your life. If you want to be a lawyer, if you want to be a doctor, the only thing that is certain is that you will have to play in the game of finance. You're going to have to pay taxes. You're going to have to buy a home, pay rent, all that stuff. So why are we not getting this education earlier on? So it's just that for me is mind-blowing.
Yeah. Okay, thanks a lot for your insights. So we've heard about the economic, business, and social impact of financial education. Now let's shift gears and talk about how to implement it effectively in the solutions on the platforms. So we know that consumers increasingly turn to digital platforms for financial advice and learning, but how we can make these experiences personalized, engaging, and really impactful for them. So David, how can financial education content be personalized to meet diverse customers' needs? And how important is UX in making this educational component effective?
I think UX is extremely important. I mean, something that we're seeing today is that, with AI, we can generate tremendous amount of content. But the one thing that doesn't change is how we absorb it, right? It doesn't matter if you create 50 books in one day, if you cannot read them, you cannot use that information. And for us, that's what we're focusing on, is how that user experience, how can we implement the best education and gamification practices so these complex topics can be understood and the people can actually engage with the content. So I think that's where the actual way that you deliver that content, it's incredibly important. And I think there are things that we all learn different, right? Maybe James likes to read books. I might like to watch videos better. So being able to alternate the way we display that content is also extremely important. So the last thing I would say is that AI is great by all means, and it's allowing us to create content on the spot, right? Maybe James found that my app is too easy. Maybe Sebastian thought it was too hard. So then we're gonna go back. We're gonna talk to to our trained AI, say, hey, we're gonna need to make it a bit easier, simplify the questions, and so on. So it's really allowing us to personalize the experience for each of the users that is coming. And of course, we just keep looking at the data, right? What modules are being completed more often? What modules or what questions are being answered incorrectly more often? Is the way we structure the question, is it not answered properly? So it is important that we leverage AI. It is important that we leverage the data analytics. But in the end, is how we display that content and just learning from our users.
Okay. And from the gamification perspective, are there any sort of tools that are universally effective in your opinion, or some sort of resources to offer to customers to build their financial skills? I mean, we know that there are different kinds of components for gamifications, like calculators, tutorials, interactive quizzes. Do you have your own insights of which one of these are more effective or some less, James, from your opinion?
I've got a slightly different perspective on it. I think all of those can be useful in the right place, but I think it's more how you put them together and how you structure your program. So we often find having a points-based system is helpful because it allows people to generate rewards based on doing very different types of things. So watch a video, get some points. Complete a quiz, would get some points. Refer a friend, get some points, and then being able to use those points for different things as well. So you have two elements in there, the accrual and the earn and the burn. So earning points are a very flexible way of rewarding people. And then the burning, you can make that very flexible as well and adapt that to David's point in terms of understanding what people's interests are. So some people might want to say, you know what, I'm going to use my points and I'm going to do a prize draw. Instead of getting a guaranteed return, I'm going to do a prize draw and I might win a slightly bigger prize. But it's fun. It hasn't cost me anything to get the points and I can have a bit of fun. Other people are much more motivated by progress, by seeing progress, and that can be progress bars or Monobank, for example, in Ukraine, introduced a very gamified experience, lots of a badge reward system for users who complete tasks and hit milestones, updating their profile or using Apple and Android Pay, for example. So they then get badges that get awarded to them. The badge has no meaningful actual value, but people like it because they've been rewarded for something and get something in return that they can then display on their app. I mean, they grew incredibly. In 2017, I think they launched, and they've now got over 6 million customers. They've got 1.3 million people that use their app on a daily basis. And I think they now own, within 4 years of launch, they own 35% of all mobile banking in Ukraine. So, it's not just the gamification, but the gamification is really what set them apart from everyone else. And it was a much more playful experience. It was much more sort of youth oriented, and they took a big portion of the younger audience there. And that, I think, points to where you've got this great opportunity then to keep that going. So you've got the badges, you're encouraging people to learn more, you can give them rewards, you can have leaderboards, and by structuring the gamification program around that, you can take people on this long-term sort of loyalty journey with you as a financial institution, bringing in different elements that are going to be more important to people over the course of their life. Because another thing we know, and David maybe will have the stats on this, but I know that I know this to be a fact. I just don't know the stats on it. But people are very unlikely to change their bank. People get a bank, they set up all their direct debits, and then they just don't change. But are the banks effectively leveraging the value of those people? i.e., I know that my bank doesn't do a very good job. It doesn't encourage me to have better savings accounts. It doesn't offer me ways of investing in the stock market or trying to build a pension. Or if it does, it's just clumsy and old-fashioned. I might get an email, I might get a pop-up notification. But if it was an education, and I think this is really important and where I'm very passionate about it, but if it said, so why do you think, do you know why you should get a pension? And the bank knows so much about you as well. So this is, again, a brilliant opportunity for them to go, well, we know what you spend all your money on. We know how you structure your spending over time. So then they can use AI to really target people with the products they need at the point at which they should be considering them to get the maximum output. And you've got very strong messages that you can put in. A pound invested today is going to be worth X in 25 years. There's lots of things that can be done that make it much more appealing and much more interesting than just sending you an email saying you should think about getting a pension.
Okay, thanks, James. I know that you're also working quite a lot with gamification components. David, do you have any sort of opinion on the ones that may be more and less effective on particular use cases?
Yeah, yes. And so to James' point, I think something that where he started is sometimes I've seen that people just try to throw gamification just like, oh, we'll try a million things. And that's not the way, right? It really has to be something you think of. For example, for us, our platforms have had over 90,000 users. So we've been trying to learn from those experiences. And it was trial and error. And then you learn that some things work in different ways. I'll give you an example. Something that we started using was real incentives. James actually mentioned this. Some real incentives like books that I mentioned in my last example. But whenever we would say, hey, there is a gift card this month, we would just see people start using the app like crazy. And so we did see those jump like 100, 200% on interaction with the app. So those things work. But sometimes you can also do too much gamification where you actually end up getting lost. And that was, we were at fault. The first time we went live with the first platform, we just had too much going on. People just didn't understand what was what, how did it work, and so it does take time. And again, going back to the financial institutions, if they want to implement this, that's why they should either go with an expert that knows what they're doing, put best practices together so that it works correctly. And you also got to think, what is the intent that you want the user to have, right? In our case, a lot of times with the partners that we work with it's just the first interaction with the client. And then what we want them to do is learn about either the bank that we're working with or the robo-advisor that we're working with. And in many cases, it's about changing institution. So to James' point, it's incredibly hard to move from your bank. Even though we might not like our bank, it's just something we don't do. And if you look at the story of Revolut, I mean, that's been really what they became successful. They started just becoming the side bank, right? If I travel, it's just easy to do. And over time, they started finding the right way, like offering the right products. You can invest with us, you can have you can have the lounge, all those different things. And then slowly people started saying, well, I use this every day. I actually like the experience here. And it started shifting. So that's kind of what we're trying to do is help our partners build that relationship with the potential new clients and show them a better way.
Okay. Thanks. So you've touched a little bit on the topic of AI. Of course, this is a hot topic in almost every industry right now, in every domain. How does AI fit in this picture in financial education, in gamification of the processes? Do you have any sort of experiences with where it works best and how we could consider it as part of the story? James, from your perspective?
So I don't think there are very many experiences out there that show where it works best yet. I just don't think people are using it. But I think I can see how it would be used, and I kind of touched on that before. your bank or your financial institution has a lot of information about you, but they also have millions of customers. So they're not going to be able to do, personalized approaches to you without using AI. However, if they do use AI, and they can then create sort of personalized learning paths, which can then adopt gamification. So you create the modules that inform about different elements of the products that the bank have, and then use AI to identify that customer by not only how they're spending their money or how they're putting their money in savings, investing it, whatever, but also by their age, their demographic, what exactly they are spending money on. I mean, they can see that, and you can infer a lot from that. And then using that, there is a saying, I think, that I can't remember, maybe Google or one of the big companies, was don't be creepy. So you have to be a bit careful not to make it too personalized that people go, hold on a minute, I think you're spying on me. What's going on here? This is like too personal. So it needs to kind of take that middle ground of being something being presented to people at the right time, in the right context, with the right content, that actually addresses a problem that person is feeling or is willing to engage with at that moment in time. I think that's really critical. And that's where AI, I think, can do an amazing job, because it can do all the heavy lifting in terms of the analysis of actually understanding people's, where they are in their life. I mean, a great example is if someone is thinking about having a family, then their spending habits are probably going to change a bit. And there are things that you can probably see as to where they're spending their money and how they're spending the money, and that they're thinking about doing that. And I'm sure with a bit of, when you apply that at scale, you'll be pretty good at predicting exactly what people's life stage is. And, then at the point that they do have children, that marks a huge inflection point in someone's life where they probably need to really think about how their financial planning needs to change right then. But are they then given those tools and given the learning opportunity to feel informed about where they're moving to next? Or do they just carry on as they are because they're not getting anything useful? And I think it's mostly the latter at the moment. I think some institutions are probably doing a reasonable job, but not many.
Okay. David, would you like to add anything on the AI perspective on this topic?
Sure. Maybe I want to share a bit of what our experience has been, and then maybe also share a bit of the negative side of AI. I would say in our experience, it's been fantastic because we've kind of created the platform to display the content, to get all the microlearning, and we have trained our AI to basically help us. We can feed it with any type of content, and then it can display in a very nice way. So whenever we go to, for example, another country, now we can have real localized financial literacy content for people in that region. Something we had in the past was that basically everybody had access, but it was maybe Investopedia, which was US based, right? So if you're maybe in Switzerland, Croatia, anywhere else, there were some things that maybe didn't add up. Like, for example, pension schemes, those are different around the world, different benefits, different taxes. So that is something that AI allows us to do, is really localize the content, really make it tailor-made for the region. And to your point, Sebastian, is also it allows us to learn from the users and always be tweaking the content, which James touched on it. What I do want to bring up is the other side of the coin, which is all this fake information about, how to get rich quick. I mean, if today you go, I don't know, on TikTok or Instagram, 90% of those videos is like, I bought here, I sold, I'm a millionaire, I got a Ferrari. Like, it's not reality. And what it's doing is that it's allowing us to create so much fake content, but it obviously performs well, because who doesn't want to get rich, right? But it is a problem, especially for those younger generations. And the problem is that it is very hard to compete with real financial education because it's kind of slow and steady and it's over time. Well, on the other side, you have all these people promising you quick returns, get rich tomorrow. And sadly, we're training the younger generations to believe that that's the way it works. So I think overall AI is obviously a really good thing. It's just we really got to be aware for the other side of the coin, which is misinformation.
Yeah, that's perfect.
It's a really good point. It's a really good point. I can see that a majority of the financial information that I see presented to me is exactly that. You can make, you can be a millionaire, you can do this, follow these steps and you're guaranteed this. And it's like, well, why are you telling everyone that they can be a millionaire? Why don't you just do it yourself?
Yeah.
If it's that good, you would surely just sit there and do it yourself. So, you don't have to scratch too much under the surface to actually sort of understand that. And but it's the allure. It's always been there, hasn't it? There's always been get rich quick schemes that are appealing to people because they promise a lot for no input. And the reality is, for longer term financial planning, there's always going to be input, but actually the output can be incredibly materially better than it is by actually doing it properly, by planning, than by not planning and ending up at age 55 with not enough money in your pension and a mountain to climb. It doesn't have to be a pension. It can be investments. It can be whatever it is. But if you get to the age of 25 and you've got nothing in the pot, at the age of 55, you've got nothing in the pot, I think it's a big challenge, because you're looking there of like, how the hell am I going to accrue this enough money to live on in 10 years' time when I retire? It's a huge challenge.
Yeah. And really, it's just about little decisions that you make early on. I mean, for me, is when people understand compound interest, and I get it, I can show you a chart, and people is like, okay, that chart looks nice. But when you start doing it, and you're 5 years in, and you saw that those $100 that every month you're putting into your investment account, and you see that grow, then you realize the power of it. So it's something that sadly is not going to yield the return the next day, but it's just about getting started and just put it in there. Don't look at it. Look at it in 5 years. Sadly, you gotta have discipline, which a lot of people don't. But by all means, and the one thing I would like to add is this is why also financial institutions are so great placed to deliver financial education because they're held to a very high standard. So you know that whatever content they're putting, yes, they might be trying to sell you something, but you do know that they're telling you probably was a lot more likely to be reality than what you're going to be looking at TikTok and Instagram. So that brand value has, that brand has a lot of value.
Yeah, totally agree. So I'm curious. We've mentioned a couple of things about how to implement the financial education, how to approach it strategically. But let's say if the businesses would like to would have a plan to introduce the financial education components into their system, what are the best ways for them to measure and evaluate whether this is effective on the digital platform to ensure that it's actually driving impact for their customers and to plan any sort of strategic pivots around that. What do you think, James?
I think there's some classic metrics that they can use, and the beauty is on a digital platform, it's pretty easy. I mean, the first sort of metric you would look at is engagement. So engagement metrics, how much time are people spending looking at these tools? How many times are they repeating the interaction with different bits of financial education? How far are they along the progress to completion in terms of learning? Maybe completion never gets there because you're always going to have different financial goals. So I think those are the engagement metrics. And then you've got behavioral impact as well, which is probably the next step. Is like, once you've got people engaging, understanding more, how is that then impacting their behavior? Are they saving more? Are they reducing debt, having less money on their credit cards? And are they making better decisions for the future? And again, that you can say is, are they putting money aside into long-term savings accounts? Are they taking out ISAs in the UK? What are they doing pension-wise? And I think all of those things are very simple, basic mechanics and extremely measurable. And, when you look at that and then you think, well, how do you know if you do it and you sort of think it's working, what's working better than other things? Well, you can do A/B testing. And that's very easy as well. Once you've got a digital platform that's offering this, then putting different mechanics out to different people, honing the offering over time, improving it. I mean, this is not rocket science. This is not difficult to do. And I think both David and I our companies both offer digital platforms that make it incredibly easy for people to engage and for institutions to engage and start doing this. So the barrier to entry is very low. It's just the will for the big institutions to do it. And I think where they will be forced to do it is when some of the more fintech, some of the startups will do it and start eating their lunch. And you've seen that with people like Monzo and Revolut, Monobank in Ukraine and things like that. So it's starting to happen.
Okay. So to add to this question, what I'm also curious about what are your thoughts about this around this are different demographics, because it will be totally different approach for people above 50s, 60s, right? They have different approach to financials and savings compared to people in their 20s, or even young adults and children. There are some solutions on the market aimed for parents to teach their children about savings, about the financial education. So how would you like to propose to build a solution which would cater for different needs of different demographics? How to build such solutions? David, what do you think about it?
So it's actually very interesting because when we started the very first version of a platform, we were going B2C before we started going B2B. We started just always aiming for that younger generation. We were thinking the Gen Zs, and immediately we saw that most of our users were average 25 to 35 years old, so 30 on average. And we were just shocked. And we were just asking the questions like, why were you interested? And we thought this would be too easy. And they just said, well, I've been looking for real financial education, but everything I found online is either get rich quick or it's too boring or too complicated. So this is the first one that kind of hit the gap. And obviously that gave us a learning, like, no, whenever you think you have content that is maybe for younger generations, maybe you're wrong. And obviously, as we pivoted going more to the B2B, now we have partners in Southeast Asia, for example. So it's totally different demographic, right? It's just not, forget the ages, it's just a different approach to money, the way they talk about money. And this is why, again, it's not a one solution fix all the problems, is by working with the partner in the region, right? They know their customers better than anybody else. What has worked, what hasn't worked. And then what we can do is, together with our technology, then deliver that content. And really what we do sometimes, for example, we're going to work with an asset manager. So as you can imagine, asset managers is not really targeting the 18-year-old kids. So we need to tweak the content to make it a bit more complicated, right? Not be saying like, if Peter has 2 bananas and loses 1 banana, right? You gotta make it a bit more complicated. So and again, this is where AI really helps us, because it allows us to tweak the content depending on the demographic that we're targeting. By getting the feedback from the partner that we're working with, we actually use all the materials of our existing partners. So if they have blogs, we use all those blogs to train the AI so that we can then create the content that matches their tone, that matches the kind of content that they've been putting out there. So it really targets the audience that they're already speaking with. Of course, if they want to target somebody younger, so for example, there was a bank in Costa Rica, we were talking for a long time. The whole target was, we want to go with 18-year-old kids. So it was all about, okay, how do we use more videos? How do we use more images? How do we simplify the content? And again, here's where AI just comes incredibly into play. But the knowledge of the partner is probably the most important piece.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree entirely. I think it's always the first conversation we have with any customer is, what are you looking for? What are the outcomes you're looking for, and who is your audience that you're applying for? And then you have to dig in a bit more, because sometimes it transpires that who they think their audience is not their audience. So, who actually does take out accounts with you? So therefore, who's likely to actually be looking at your material? But if you think it's 18-year-olds and the reality is it's 25-year-olds, then you're talking to the wrong people, or you're doing something wrong because you're not connecting with your marketing with the right audience, and that will also change the sort of mechanics and against the demographic, because younger users are much more likely to be interested in sort of interactive short form content. They want to have a quicker bang for their buck, as it were. Whereas older users are more likely to be interested in things like guided experience, clear milestones, a slower pace of learning. And again, using AI and then adapting all of that into what you're presenting to people at the time, also with the style of learning, is going to be incredibly powerful.
Okay, totally agree with you. Okay, so we've discussed a little bit about implementation and theory, so let's put it into practice. So let's talk a little bit about real world use cases and what has worked in the real world and what hasn't. So we've already touched on these couple of examples, but David, if you were to say about one particular use case that was the most efficient in implementation of the financial education on the market, what would that be?
I gotta go with marketing. I mean, it's incredible what we've been able to do with this brands. I mean, going back to the numbers I was given, the amount of money that financial institutions spend on advertising is just outrageous. And they're all competing for who yells louder, right? It's kind of how they go about it. So your cost per lead goes, anywhere from 30 up to 50 or up to $500, depending on what you work in finance in the region. But what we've learned is that people are 20 times more likely to download our app than to sign up into like a bank account or sign up into a newsletter about finance, just because we do it for free. Well, our partners do it for free. Here's a free financial education, learn in a fun and easy way. So and now you start building the relationship, right? It's about build, especially when it comes to money. We are so afraid of making mistakes with money, so it takes time for us to trust people. So what we've learned is that not only are we able to leverage education to open the door for that first interaction, but then you already built that relationship. And this is not rocket science. This is not new. This is content marketing. We're just doing it, let's call it 2.0. Content marketing just allowed you to educate your customers before they buy. We're just doing that, but for finance, really having the potential customer right in center. And then as they learn about products, as we learn about them as well, then we can say, hey, look, you mentioned your goal is maybe to buy a house, have a low risk profile. Do you want to start investing in something like this? So it's really about that onboarding experience is where I've seen the biggest impact so far.
Okay, thanks, David. What about you, James? Do you see any particular strong use case that you would use as a
I mean, by far the best use case that I can point to and because it's very current is the Scottish Widows pension mirror. It has completely changed their way of thinking about financial education, financial literacy, and gamification, to the extent that they are actually building a whole team internally dedicated to gamification. Now, I mean, I would obviously plug at this stage that they didn't need to do that. They could have spoken to us and we could have handled it for them. But I still think it's a brilliant use case on the basis that they did it. They did it in a relatively limited way. They proved it worked. I mean, nearly 200% increase in registration for their Scottish Widows app is phenomenal on the basis of a pensions game, and the whole engagement process with their employees, their potential customers, and employers is really hitting all of the key points, the key audiences that they need to hit, and it's worked, and they're proving that it's worked by reinvesting and putting more and more money and more effort into gamification. So I would say watch Scottish Widows, watch what they do next.
Okay, perfect. So my next question is more trickier because it's about failed attempts to introduce the financial education, and it's difficult because it's not as transparent as the successful ones. But maybe you have some thoughts about like common mistakes that companies should avoid when implementing financial education. Let's start with you, James. Do you see any sort of recommendations what to avoid?
Yeah, pretty much everything that the banks have done traditionally to date. Theoretical education about financial instruments, boring. People need to really be able to understand it. How does it apply to me in my life? And that's where the power of technology comes in now. With AI, having more data and understanding people's real life through the interactions that they're making, you can provide them really valuable information that's personalized to them. And the second thing where people have made mistakes, I think David's talked about this a lot, through blogs and financial education, through passive products. It's just boring. It's boring. And how are you going to expect someone to go and search that out when they're not fundamentally interested in the first place? People want to be presented with something that's relevant for them. They want to be rewarded immediately for engaging with it. And that could just be a badge or a kudos or celebration, or it could be something real, like a book, as David's used in the past. That will deliver them a result, but very few people are doing it. So the common mistakes to avoid are all the things that most banks are currently doing.
Okay, anything you would like to add to that, David?
Yeah, sorry, just getting a call right in the middle. Let me hang up. Sorry about that. Yes, no, I mean, I have to go with James in this one, but most banks have just tried the minimum effort, right? It's like, we want to try it. Let's invest tiny amount of money. Let's create some blogs. And then it's like, whoa, there's no return. And it's like, well, of course, you tried it. I'll give you a great example. We were talking to a large insurance company. And we were extremely excited about, them reaching out to us, really exploring what we were doing. And then we started working about the content, and we just said, well, look, guys, all we need is a bit, of communication from your side. You're the expert in insurance. So we will need your expertise to double check the content, make sure that everything we do is double checked so that, nothing goes out there to the public. And they went like, oh, we gotta have a person, and we're talking like 4 hours a week, 5 hours. I mean, we're not talking, and they literally said it's too much work. And I'm just like, so you're not even willing to allocate a little bit of time, and then you wonder why your financial literacy is not working. Like it's not magic. It takes time. We're gonna get out there. We're gonna learn from the audience, and I think that's the biggest thing. If you're gonna commit to it, give it a fair go. Yes, 2 years later, it's not working. It's not yielding the results you wanted. It's time to pivot. But it's the same, like, I'm gonna bring it back to investing, right? I always tell people, if you invest, you got to invest in the long run. You shouldn't just go today into a stock and then just because it went down 20%, now all your thesis is out the window. You got to stick to it for a while. Once you see, your thesis is proven correctly or incorrectly, it's down the line. Give it time. So I think that's it. It's just they expect ROI day one, and with blogs. So it's no wonder it hasn't worked.
Okay. Perfect. So before we wrap up, let's do a quick round for you, James, and for you, David. What's the one actionable change, or maybe a couple of them, that you would recommend to organizations looking to enhance their financial education initiatives? How to even start when you would like to kick things off, but what do you need to have to start? Maybe starting with you, James.
Well, I would say this, but I mean, incorporate game mechanics into your financial education. I mean, that is the kind of point of this whole discussion. But I think that's the key is, don't try to do everything immediately, but just try one thing and start with that, measure and monitor, look at the success, and then build from there. But just start. And I'm sure David will have a view on that too.
Yeah, and I think it's, you're a bank or insurance company. Stick to what you know what to do. For these things, go to people that work on gamification, like James or ourselves, right? So if they want to build a new house, be my guest. It's definitely a challenge, but why try to reinvent the wheel? So all I would say is, it's go look at people who have done it, have the experience, get that advice, and then build it. Don't just try to build it from scratch just because it's a good idea. I think it's important to seek advice at the right time.
Okay, perfect. Thanks a lot. That was quite a big range of very good insights from your perspective. We've explored why financial education is crucial, how companies can integrate it efficiently, and what we can learn from real-world experiences. I think a few key takeaways that I noted is, firstly, that introducing education is not only important from the financial literacy for the users and generation, like in general, but it's also effective for the businesses, for growing the users' trust, engagement, and loyalty. and financially literate users can be more and will use more and more financial instruments which grow business in the end. So I think it's a win-win for both sides. And also, in gamification is really important, but served properly. I think that's really important, and it should be tailored to a targeted audience. And also, companies, I think, should invest into content, avoid the boring content, make it more engaging, as you said. And I think I will close it with what you said, James, that you just need to start, analyze, experiment, measure, and pivot. But you need to start and see how your audience works with your solution. Okay, so huge thank you for our panelists, James, David. It was a pleasure. Thanks a lot for sharing your insights. Thanks again, and enjoy the rest of your day.
So have a good one.
Thank you.